At just 31, Ramon Novarro revealed a secret that stunned even his closest friends. For years, a lover had quietly lived hidden inside his Hollywood mansion, unseen by the public, unknown to the studio bosses who controlled his every move. And when the truth slipped out, it was not good at all. A scandal was brewing, threatening to ruin the image of the man MGM once called the Latin lover. But before we uncover how that secret unraveled, we need to travel back in time to understand where his story began. Ramon Novarro was born José Ramón Gil Samaniego on the 6th of February 1899 in Durango, Mexico. He grew up in a large Catholic family that valued tradition, music, and faith. His father was a respected dentist, his mother a cultured woman who passed on her love of the arts. Yet life was not easy. The turbulence of the Mexican Revolution in the early 1910 seconds forced the family to flee their homeland and resettle in Los Angeles. That sudden exile left deep scars and an early understanding of how fragile security could be. Southern California, in the 1910 seconds, was a land of contradictions. On one hand, a haven for migrants, artists, and dreamers searching for a new start. On the other, a place where strict moral codes and growing prejudice shaped the social climate. By the time Novarro reached adolescence, ragtime music floated from parlors, silent movie houses flickered in every small town, and a new industry called Hollywood was rising from orange groves and dusty lots. As a boy, he was deeply sensitive, with a gift for music and performance. He studied piano, voice, and even pursued hopes of becoming a professional singer. His striking looks, dark eyes, and graceful manner quickly drew notice. Family friends encouraged him to try his luck in moving pictures. But for a young Mexican immigrant, opportunity was not guaranteed. America in the 1910 seconds and 1920 seconds held rigid views on race and sexuality. A boy from Mexico would have to fight for every inch of ground. Still, he was determined. He worked odd jobs to help his family survive, all while practicing piano and learning English. Los Angeles offered both hope and humiliation. Streetcars carried businessmen in bowler hats, while Mexican immigrants often faced discrimination. The film industry itself was both an escape and a mirror of society's bias. Latino actors were often cast as bandits, servants, or exotic seducers. But Ramon, with his refined bearing, carried himself differently. He dreamed of stepping past stereotypes, even if it meant bending to Hollywood's rigid rules. By the late 1910 seconds, he was performing in church choirs and teaching piano. Friends recalled a polite, gentle young man who carried himself like a star before he ever was one. Around him, Los Angeles was transforming into the movie capital of the world. Bright studio lights lit up night skies, and silent stars like Rudolph Valentino set audiences swooning. Ramon was watching closely, waiting for his chance to enter that glittering world. And soon, that chance would come. Ramon Novarro began his Hollywood journey humbly, appearing as an extra in the early 1920 seconds. His delicate yet striking features caught the eye of producers, though roles at first were limited to nameless soldiers, dancers, and background faces. He studied every movement on set, observing how established actors commanded attention. Unlike many hopefuls, Novarro had discipline. He was determined not just to be handsome, but to be remembered. His break came in 1922 when he won supporting roles in films like The Prisoner of Zenda. Soon, the press noticed his charm and poise. MGM executives realized they had something powerful, a young Mexican actor who could follow in the footsteps of Rudolph Valentino, the great screen lover. When Valentino's sudden death in 1926 shocked the world, studios rushed to fill the void. Novarro was thrust into the spotlight, promoted as Hollywood's next romantic idol. Then came Ben-Hur, A Tale of the Christ in 1925. One of the most ambitious silent epics ever filmed. Cast as Judah Ben-Hur, Novarro delivered a performance that combined heroic strength with quiet sensitivity. The chariot race sequence became legendary, and his image was plastered on posters across America and Europe. Overnight, he transformed into a global star. Audiences adored him. Women swooned over his soulful eyes, while men admired his athletic presence. Fan clubs multiplied. The studios crafted his image carefully, emphasizing his Catholic upbringing, his devotion to family, his wholesomeness. Photoplay and Motion Picture magazine published glowing profiles, presenting him as a safe, noble replacement for Valentino's sultry intensity. But even at his peak, Novarro felt the pressure. He knew Hollywood loved him for his exotic appeal, yet expected him to remain respectable and silent about his private life. In interviews, he often smiled politely, dodging questions about romance. Studios arranged photographs with glamorous actresses, pairing him at parties with female stars he barely knew. The message was clear. To preserve his career, he must appear unattached, desirable, and above all, heterosexual. Still, the success was intoxicating. By the late 1920s, he starred in films like Mata Hari and Scaramouche, commanding some of the highest salaries in Hollywood. He lived in a grand Los Angeles mansion filled with ornate furniture, religious icons, and the quiet company of close companions. To the world, he was the noble Latin lover, a man adored on screen and untouched by scandal. Yet beneath the perfection, a more fragile reality waited. The higher he rose, the harder it became to hide his truth. Behind the glittering facade of studio-crafted photographs and orchestrated publicity romances, Ramon Novarro lived a hidden truth. From his earliest days in Hollywood, he was drawn to men. Yet the climate of the 1920 seconds and 1930 seconds allowed no room for openness. Morality clauses in contracts warned that any scandal, especially about sexuality, could end a career overnight. For Novarro, secrecy was not a choice. It was survival. Biographers recount that he formed his first discreet relationships within the artistic circles of Los Angeles. Wealthy patrons, fellow actors, and behind-the-scenes crew members created a network of trust, places where a man could briefly let down his guard. Private dinner parties in Hollywood Hills, mansions or quiet weekends in Santa Monica cottages became sanctuaries. In those hidden spaces, Novarro allowed himself the freedom to love. One of his longest connections was with Herbert Howe, a film journalist who became not just his publicist but also a companion. Howe helped shield Novarro's image, shaping stories for the press while quietly understanding his private world. Their relationship, though never openly acknowledged, blended affection with strategy. Together, they navigated the dangerous line between truth and performance. There were others, too. Ramon was said to be close with actors like Tallulah Bankhead, who served as a trusted ally, and to have shared intimate bonds with men who understood the cost of secrecy. In his own mansion, he sometimes offered lovers refuge, allowing them to live quietly, away from prying eyes. One companion reportedly remained hidden there for years, sharing his life in silence while the world outside celebrated him as a symbol of heterosexual romance. These secret relationships carried heavy risks. Paparazzi lurked near parties, tabloids like Confidential thrived on scandal, and studios monitored their stars with private detectives. Novarro learned to master the art of coded gestures. A brush of the hand. A glance held too long. A whispered promise arranged through intermediaries. For every moment of tenderness, there was the shadow of fear. And yet, within those hidden rooms, love was real. Letters written in careful handwriting, lovers who joined him on quiet European trips under the guise of assistants, and long evenings at the piano, where he would play hymns or romantic melodies, revealed a man longing for connection. These relationships gave him strength, but they also deepened his loneliness. Every kiss carried the threat of discovery. Every romance risked becoming a weapon against him. As the 1930 seconds dawned, Novarro's fame remained bright. But the whispers around him grew louder. Hollywood was tightening its grip with the Hays Code, and the walls around his private world were closing in. The question was not if, but when, his secret life would collide with the image that had made him a star. By the mid-1930 seconds, Ramon Novarro faced a storm. The talkies had arrived, and while his voice was pleasant, his popularity waned in a world eager for new faces. At the same time, whispers about his private life began slipping beyond trusted circles. In an era when the press could destroy an actor with a single headline, even a rumor of homosexuality was poison. The Hays Code, enforced in 1934, demanded strict morality from Hollywood. Studios became more ruthless, surveilling their own stars, punishing those who strayed from the image of clean American virtue. For Novarro, this meant greater isolation. Every visitor to his home risked being noticed. Every friendship with another man could spark questions. The studio that once celebrated him now grew wary, quietly pushing him towards smaller roles, and eventually letting his contract expire. Tabloids like Confidential thrived on suggestion. They hinted at lavish parties and exotic tastes. None printed the truth outright, but the insinuations were enough. Casting directors turned cautious. Novarro, once earning thousands a week, found himself scrambling for work in B pictures and stage tours. His lavish mansion, once a symbol of triumph, became a gilded prison, where loneliness echoed louder than applause. Emotionally, the toll was crushing. Friends later recalled his gentle spirit turning anxious, withdrawn. He prayed often, clinging to his Catholic faith, yet carried guilt for desires the church condemned. He drank more heavily. Some nights he would sit at the piano, playing hymns until dawn, lost in memories of glory and of the loves he could never name. The world outside was changing too. America in the Depression era looked for distractions, but it had little mercy for fallen idols. Younger stars like Clark Gable and Robert Taylor now filled the roles Novarro once dominated. To audiences, the Latin lover seemed like a relic of a silent age. To insiders, he was a liability, a man whose secrets might erupt into scandal. By the late 1930s, Novarro's career had nearly collapsed. The man who had once raced chariots on screen now faced an emptiness far more brutal than any gladiator's defeat. And yet, his story was far from over. He would live for decades more, watching Hollywood evolve, even as his own role in it faded. As the decades passed, Ramon Novarro's life became a study in contrasts. He no longer commanded leading roles, yet he remained a familiar face. Studios occasionally called him back for character parts in films like The Big Steal or guest spots on television during the 1,950 seconds and 1,960 seconds. For audiences who remembered him as Judah Ben-Hur, these appearances were bittersweet reminders of a vanished golden age. He lived quietly in his hillside Los Angeles home, a mansion filled with religious icons, old photographs, and memories of stardom. Though his wealth had dwindled, he remained generous, giving to Catholic charities and supporting friends who struggled. Visitors described him as gracious, soft-spoken, and somewhat melancholy, a man who still carried himself like a star but seemed haunted by time's passage. The world outside was shifting. The 1,960 seconds brought cultural revolutions, the beginnings of LGBTQ movements, and new voices challenging Hollywood's silence. Yet Novarro, deeply tied to his faith and scarred by decades of secrecy, never came out publicly. His relationships remained private, his romantic life confined to whispers. In his solitude, he kept music as a constant companion, often retreating to his piano to play hymns or Mexican folk songs. By the 1,970 seconds, he was seen less as a fallen idol and more as a relic of silent cinema, invited to retrospectives and honored by film historians. Younger generations marveled at his beauty on screen, unaware of the sacrifices behind that carefully crafted image. Friends noted that he often spoke with pride about Ben-Hur and his early triumphs, yet rarely touched on the personal cost of living a double life. Tragically, his later years ended in violence. In 1968, Novarro was murdered in his own home by two young men he had trusted to visit. The crime shocked Hollywood, not only for its brutality, but for the cruel way the media handled it. Instead of remembering his artistry, many headlines reduced him to a scandal, focusing on his sexuality rather than his legacy. It was a final indignity, a reminder of how unforgiving the world could be to men forced to hide their truth. Yet beyond the tragedy, there was resilience. Even in silence, even in secrecy, Ramon Novarro had lived authentically in the ways he could. He preserved his dignity to the end, never publicly denying who he was, but never exploiting it either. His story is one of survival, of navigating an industry and a society that demanded masks. And in the quiet of his final years, he remained what he had always been, a man of faith, of beauty, and of longing. Ramon Novarro's story is both luminous and heartbreaking. He was one of the brightest stars of Hollywood's silent era. A man whose face once symbolized romance, adventure, and honor. Yet behind that carefully polished image was a human being forced to live in shadows, navigating love in secrecy, and paying the price for a world not ready to accept him. His life reminds us that fame cannot erase loneliness, and talent cannot shield a person from prejudice. The very mansion that symbolized his triumph became his sanctuary, and eventually, his prison. Even in death, the world treated him harshly, focusing on scandal rather than the artistry that once inspired millions. But if we look closely, his legacy is not one of scandal, it is of resilience. Ramon's journey reflects the cost of silence, the ache of forbidden love, and the courage required simply to exist in an unforgiving time. He teaches us that behind every glamorous image lies a fragile soul searching for acceptance. As you think about his story, ask yourself, how many other stars lived and died carrying secrets they could never share? How different might their lives have been in a more compassionate world? If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Which part of Ramon Novarro's journey touched you most? Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the hidden stories of Hollywood's golden age, the stories of love, loss, and survival that still echo today.